Hey Bernie, how you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Great. I understand you got a story you want to tell.
Yeah, I want to tell a story of white prejudice towards people like me in the Bible Belt, the low country of South Carolina, the deep South, okay? And the prejudice that Northerners have against white Southerners. Now, before people go apeshit, okay, and they start to talk about uh, um, you know, the institutionalized racism in the South that was here when I was growing up, black water fountains, black and white water fountains, waiting rooms, bathrooms, and so forth. This is not at all the equivalent of that. This is pretty light stuff, is what I'm trying to tell you. Um, uh, it's not, I'm making a comparison. That institutionalized racism was there. Uh, I was heavily involved in that, in the civil rights movement, integrating schools, the school principal, writing about it, introducing Black studies into the curriculum, protests, the whole thing. So was my friend who I grew up with, who I've written about, who I need to include here, the writer Pat Conroy. Okay. Um, we got away with stuff in Beaufort down here because we were natives. I didn't get away with stuff in Mississippi when we sued the board to include black people on it because I wasn't a native. Okay. So, I want to go back now, though, to being a native, to being part of the South, that institutionalized racism. And in 1960s, late 1960s, 68, 67, yeah, there was the Orangeburg Massacre. And the Orangeburg Massacre, you had these all over the place. Somebody throws a stick or a piece of wood at somebody. The important thing is the police, when they were demonstrating, because they wanted to have public accommodations available to them in places like a bowling alley in Orangeburg. Okay, when they were uh, uh, um, doing the demonstration, there were 200 protesters uh, from the college, South Carolina State, and the police came, of course, and they fired on the protesters and killed three of them. It was called the Orangeburg Massacre. So I'm setting up something here for you. Now, around 2015, 2014, I get a call from Pat's wife, Sandra, also a best-selling novelist, just to put in a plug for her there. Um, and Sandra is going to meet the antecedent of Stokely Carmichael, people like that. Uh, what happened was he wanted to meet with Pat and talk about the civil rights movement down there, which of course Pat wrote about in The Water is Wide and in the movie Conrack and even later. And so he wanted to talk to Pat, and Pat, of course, smelled smelled something weird about it. I'm sure what he smelled was somebody wanting to talk to a celebrity. So he wanted Pat, I think, knew that the guy was just star fucking. Okay. Maybe he didn't, but I know he didn't want to do it. All right. So Sandra, a guilty white woman, also very involved in civil rights, not just the past. Sandra calls me and she said, "Look, Bernie, you're in his book, The Water is Wide. You're as involved in it as he was and I was. We were all not freedom riders, we were Southerners. And uh, you know all about, what happened down here. And uh, so I'm going to go talk to him in Pat's place, but I don't want to go by myself. Okay. I need you to go with me because you're really steeped in it down here, right here in the low country. Well, I said, fine. Okay. Now, also, what interested me was I'm seeing Bakari Sellers on CNN every night. He's the son of Cleveland Sellers. Cleveland Sellers spent a year in hard labor in jail because of what is called the Orangeburg Massacre. Later, he was pardoned. He was a big civil rights hero, like Stokely Carmichael, who, who Andrew Young, whoever. So things are coming full circle for me. I remember his father, Cleveland Sellers. I remember the Orangeburg Massacre. I remember even getting involved in a debate about it with Pat. And a biracial council in South Carolina. And uh, uh, and so I said, well, he wants to talk about the South. And she said, yeah. And I said, what else? Well, she said, Bernie, he wants to talk about the South. He wants to talk to Pat, but we'll have to do. Okay. So I said, Jesus Christ. Okay. So we go down to a restaurant called Plums. He's there. We shake hands. Sandra introduces us. And of course, he knows Pat is not coming by then. Sandra's told him. And I said, you want to know more about the South? And he said, there is absolutely nothing you can tell me about the South that I don't know. Nothing. So I'm thinking, what the fuck are we doing here? Okay. So I, I realized once again, I'd found this before, that he's right about institutionalized black racism down here, the whole thing. But he doesn't know shit about the white South. And he doesn't know everything about the South because he's only looking at it from the point of view of what he called the Orangeburg Massacre. He was from New York, and he said, I was at the Orangeburg Massacre. I know what happened. There's not a darn thing you can ever tell me about the South that I don't know. Okay? So what I'm going to tell you today, Bruce, is I'm going to tell you something you don't know. And I'm going to tell you something nobody fucking out there knows. All right? And I want to do this because I am so appalled at the idea of certainty, of I know everything. You can't tell me what I don't know. There's nothing more for me to learn. And I knew, and I've told you this story, Bruce, you and I before, I'll just repeat it real quick. When I went up to Harvard for an interview for graduate school, okay? And I am thinking, wow, this is great. Now, why did I get in? Because of my work in civil rights. It certainly wasn't my test scores and my grades, because I was pretty much a done fuck, as I've told you. All right. So, and this was a white Jew. All right. In the Low Country. So what happened is I get picked up at the airport, Logan Airport, by a cab driver, Irish white cab driver, middle age. And I hear the N word in a way that I have never heard it before in my life. And believe me, growing up down here, I heard the N word. I heard, and I want to say it here, just so everybody knows that's the history. I thought I was a Klan. He thought because I was a Southerner, I was a racist. He thought because I was white and a Southerner in the Bible Belt, I was his guy, like a Klan member. We were buddies. And frankly, he was so hostile and so angry, and he scared the shit out of me so much, I didn't even bother to disagree with him. I was too scared to. I wanted to get out of that cab. Now, guess where we go on our way to Harvard? We go through Roxbury. Now, Bruce, this is very important. People out there, this is very important. I'd never seen a ghetto in my life. I'd seen a slum. I grew up near the slums. My father's grocery store was a kind of grocery store in the slums. Our business was based on the people who lived in the slums. The slums, for the most part, back then, in the 60s, it was peaceful. I wasn't afraid to walk in the slums at night. Okay. And it wasn't, I never would have thought of calling it a ghetto. The closest thing I'd ever seen to a ghetto would be Charleston. And in Charleston, you could smell it. You could smell the liquor, the drugs. You could smell the violence waiting. Okay. Never had I seen anything like Roxbury, the ghetto in Boston. Never. It teemed with violence. Okay. They might be raising hell to the roof to the rafters on church and Sunday morning, but the corners, the pawn shops, the drugs, it was scary as hell. It was hostile. Okay. And you could feel it in that white cab. All right. So I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, I never saw this before. This is really something. And this is up north. I read about it. It's not the same thing. It's experiencing it. I get up to Harvard, and the first guy who interviews me is the head of the program that I'm applying for. It's graduate school of education. And he looks at my record. He looks at me. He hears my accent, that I'm sure. And he goes through the files. And he sees where I'm from. And he says, Mr. Shine, how can you people let that kind of racism go on down there that you do? Well, I said, I just rode through Roxbury. That should be easily understandable for a guy like you from Boston. Okay. He hated my guts, um, which is no problem. Okay. Because he was an asshole. All right. But that kind of certainty was a Northern white's certainty. Was he right about us and our relationship with Black people? Of course he was. Was he right about me? Was he right about the possibilities of white Southerners? Did he really think that we were dodging people, Black people hanging from trees every time we left our neighborhood? When the Depression came, my daddy foresaw it. His customers were Black. He called them regulars. He foresaw it, and so he stocked up on food and rations in World War II. Nobody had any food in town except him. None of the big wigs, A&P, Piggly Wiggly, all those big stores. Nothing downtown. Even the corner grocery stores didn't have it. He stocked up everything. The people he rented to upstairs were Marines. They were all going to fight. He had plenty of room. The big wigs come down from downtown, the bankers, the lawyers. Hey, Morris, how you doing? Hail fellow, well met, right? So they come down and they want to buy from Daddy because he's the only one who's got anything. Daddy looks up and down. He has the shelves full of goods. And he says, sorry, boys, all this is from the regulars. His regulars were 99% Black and poor. Okay, this was my dad. When he died in that, right, the store was in the slums, Black kids were walking downtown, walking by the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery. It's beautiful. It was buried. And they had on their white Sunday clothes. And they had their shoes, patent leather shoes, tied around their shoulders. So I turned and I asked a friend of my dad's, Reverend Myers, Black Eye. And I said, what's that about? And he said, their parents have told them, when you go by Mr. Shine's grave, you wear your Sunday best today, even though it's a Saturday. You put on your white clothes. You put on your black patent leather shoes. Okay? And you take the shoes and you tie them over your shoulder because the shoes have taps on them. And the taps go clickety-clack down the sidewalk. And we don't want to disturb Mr. Shine at rest. Those were his friends. That was his business. Okay. This is the family I grew up in. And we were Jewish, so we were a little bit more moderately liberal. And yeah, uh, so I'm hearing this guy at Harvard say what he said. How can you let those kind of things go on down here? I've ridden through Roxbury. I've heard a cab driver from Boston use the N word in a way that, frankly, worse than anything I ever heard down south. And I've heard plenty. Sitting down, Bruce, with this a former president of a great civil rights organization. And here's where the Orangeburg massacre comes in. As I said before, there's nothing, Mr. Shine, you can tell me about the South. I was at the Orangeburg massacre in a very official role, I'm sure to say. And of course, I say, as I said a minute ago, Sandra, what the fuck are we doing here? And then I say, and Sandra looks desperate. She needs rescuing. I've needed it before, so I understand. And I said, I can tell you something you don't know about the South, as I told you a minute ago. And I can tell you something none of you out there know about the South. And that's what I'm going to do today. Given this context and this background, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to tell you about my grandfather.